Hi there, my name's Chris Webb and I work for Microsoft on the Power BI Customer Advisory team. And this session is called Top Tips for the Accidental Power BI Administrator. Now, if you're watching this session, I'm going to assume that congratulations are in order because guess what? Whether you like it or not, you've got a new job. You're the Power BI Administrator for your organization. What does that even mean? Well, in this session, you're going to get a chance to find out. Before we carry on, here's a disclaimer. This is not a comprehensive list of absolutely everything you need to know about administering Power BI. Instead, it's more of a relaxed session where you're going to hear some tips that I've come up with and my colleagues on the Power BI CAT team have come up with that will help you set out on that journey of becoming a great Power BI administrator and doing a good job for your company. It's going to be fairly relaxed. It will give you lots of pointers about where to look and where to continue your journey with learning, but hopefully it gives you a good idea of where to start and roughly some of the things you're going to need to do. So let's dive in. Let's start with the bad news. As you've probably already suspected, there's quite a lot of work involved with being a Power BI administrator, and indeed it could be a full-time job if you let it. Probably only the largest Power BI customers have got a full-time Power BI administrator. So what you're going to have to do is try and juggle your day job with this extra set of role responsibilities. What I'd recommend is you go to your boss and you say, well, all right, if I'm going to be a Power BI administrator, you're going to need to give me time to do it. At the very minimum, it's going to be a couple of hours every week. At maximum, it could be a couple of hours every day on top of all of the other things you're meant to be doing. But don't underestimate it. If you don't devote enough time to being a Power BI administrator, well, the rest of the organization is going to suffer. And you don't want to be the one who is the reason for Power BI to fail inside your organization, do you? Right, great. Okay, so first tip, make sure you've got enough time available to do this job. If you're going to be a Power BI administrator, you do not have to work it all out for yourself. You can just learn from everybody else's experience. You can learn from Microsoft. You can learn from other people who've done the job that you're going to have to do as well. Now, it's pretty easy to go out there and find lots of information about how to build Power BI datasets, how to learn DAX. There's tons of free stuff out there. There's tons of people out there who are willing to sell you courses on how to build datasets, write DAX, and build beautiful reports in Power BI. It's harder to go out and find good learning materials on how to be a Power BI administrator, but they do exist. So do what I do when I was preparing this presentation, go out and have a look at all of them and read through them, and by the time you've done that, you'll be really well prepared to face the future. So what are all these resources? Let's take a look at some of them. Okay, number one, you go to community.powerbi.com, there is a link here. And by the way, all the links I'm going to be showing you in this presentation are available in the slide deck for all of the Power BI training content that Microsoft makes available. Now, there's Dashboard in a Day for people who want to learn how to build Power BI reports. But more useful than that, guess what? We've got a whole course on Administrator in a Day. And you can go to this link. You can download the instructor content, you can download the attendee content. So take the course, spend some time to go over it, and it will cover in a lot of detail all of the things you're going to need to know. Moving on, there are a whole ton of white papers for Microsoft. Now, a lot of these are about technical matters, but the number one white paper that you're going to want to read if you're an administrator is this one at the top of the list here, Planning a Power BI Enterprise Deployment. It's been updated fairly recently. I'll show you. you will notice that I was a co-writer, but I was only a co-writer on the first 2 editions of this. The 3rd edition, which was released in April, May this year, was completely updated by my good friend Melissa Coates. She's done an excellent job. This is a gigantic white paper. It's like 260 pages, so it's really a book. And this is full of incredibly useful information if you want to be a Power BI admin. So by all means, download this. It's free, and take the time to read it. It will save you an awful lot of effort later on. Moving on, the team I work on at Microsoft, the Power BI Customer Advisory team, has got its own new section of the docs, the Power BI official documentation, I should say. And guess what? There is an admin and deployment section here inside it. And over time, you'll find more and more articles being added here. So as well as all of the useful technical detail here, you can learn about admin and deployment. And also there is a section here you probably want to read about establishing a center of excellence. Some colleagues of mine at Microsoft UK have also put together something called the Power BI Adoption Framework, which is available in GitHub. Now, the Power BI Adoption Framework is basically a training course. It's a whole series of slides which you can download again for free here. And if you're too lazy to go through the slides, well, guess what? They've recorded an awful lot of this material and it's available on YouTube to view for free. So there is absolutely tons and tons of material for you to go through here. So lots and lots of material available from Microsoft. But also, like I said, you can learn from your peers as well. So what we've got on the Microsoft site, if you go to customers.microsoft.com, you can search customer stories, basically case studies. And if you search for Power BI, there are going to be loads of case studies that come up. Now, I know what you're thinking. Case studies are usually fairly dull marketing exercises. There are some really good case studies for Power BI, and these are case studies with a lot of detail that's relevant for people being a Power BI administrator. Another place to look for case studies, and maybe a better place to look for more Power BI focused ones, is that if you go to powerbi.microsoft.com, so yeah, the place you'd go to sign into Power BI anyway, go to Overview and then Customer Stories. And if you click here, you'll go to a special part of the Power BI site where you can see a collection of Power BI specific customer stories. And these are the ones you'll probably want to have a look through. There are a couple I'd really like to call out. So this one here for Rockwell Automation is really great. It's got a video recorded at the Microsoft Business Applications Summit last year, which talks about their journey building up their internal Power BI Center of Excellence and internal user group. So this is a really good one. And the same goes for the Standard Bank customer story as well. So that's a really cool one as well. Final place to look, social media, of course. There are lots of blogs and materials out there on social media for Power BI, but again, it can be a little bit hard to find ones that are specifically dealing with the problems of the Power BI admin. A guy called Morten Hannibalson Olsen, who works for Grundfos, this year has published a whole series of really, really good articles about his experiences of being a Power BI administrator. So this one on the Selfservice BI beast, and some of these other ones here are really well worth a look. And then finally, in terms of blogs, my colleague Matthew Roche on the Power BI Customer Advisory team has got a really great blog, and a lot of the things that he blogs about are administration and building a data culture. So this is really well worth a read as well. Okay, next tip. The first thing you're going to need to do after you've got your new job is make sure you've got the appropriate permissions to be able to do that job. And the person that's going to be able to give you those permissions is your Microsoft 365 administrator. I almost said Office 365, but of course Office 365 has now been renamed to be Microsoft 365. A Microsoft 365 administrator is by default a Power BI administrator, and that means they can do absolutely everything with Power BI. But if you're a Microsoft 365 administrator, you probably don't know or care much about Power BI. You're the Power BI administrator, you want that job, and you're going to have the appropriate permissions. So the Microsoft 365 administrator is going to have to grant some permissions to you, and they're going to have to grant you the permission to be a Power BI administrator. That is the role that you need. So a Power BI administrator can do absolutely everything in the world of Power BI. One thing to think about: make sure you're not the only Power BI administrator inside the organization. It's going to be really handy if you've got at least one other colleague, maybe two others, who also get to be Power BI administrators. Because if you go away on holiday, or the worst comes to the worst, you fall under a bus, somebody else is going to need to do all of those tricky Power BI related admin things. And you don't want to be the one who gets called up from your sun lounger on the beach or your bed in hospital just because something's gone wrong with Power BI and you're the only person who's got the knowledge or the permissions to be able to fix it. So make sure you're a Power BI administrator, and make sure there's at least one other backup Power BI administrator. Now, the Power BI administrator can do everything relating to Power BI except manage licenses. So you are going to have a good ongoing relationship with your Microsoft 365 administration team, because they're going to be the people who are managing the licenses for you. It's also worth pointing out that there are other permissions that you can then grant for various different admin purposes as a Power BI administrator. So for example, if you've got Power BI Premium, there is a role of Power BI Premium Capacity Admin. So you can delegate some of the work of managing a premium capacity down to someone else, and that could be a quite handy thing to do as well. Once you've got your Power BI admin permissions granted to you, there are a few things you're going to probably want to check pretty urgently. First of all, you need to work out where your tenant is located. Now, your tenant, the place where all of your Power BI data will be stored by default, is going to have been created the first time anybody in your organization logged into Power BI. And it will also have been determined by which Azure regions Power BI was available in when that person first logged into Power BI. So it could have been created quite a long time ago. Now, the reason it matters is that this will dictate where, at least by default, your data is stored. And in some cases, that could matter for regulatory or compliance reasons. It's pretty easy to check where this is. In fact, you don't even need to be a Power BI administrator to do it. But basically, what you've got to do is go to the Power BI portal. So let's go there. Click on this question mark up here and go to About Power BI. So click here. Click here. When you do this, a dialog appears, and this bit here that says your data is stored in will tell you where your Power BI tenant is located. So in this case, my data is located in the North Europe data center, and that's in Ireland. Now, like I said, this could matter for legal or regulatory reasons, especially with Brexit coming up, and I know there are going to be a lot of British people watching this. It could matter for your particular organization that your data is located in a UK data center. There are other instances where, for example, I know there are organizations in Australia who suddenly found that their Power BI tenant wasn't located in Australia. And as a result, there was a bit of a performance overhead opening their reports because their users were in Australia, their data wasn't, and network latency. It is possible now to change the location of your Power BI tenant, and if you need to do it, you probably want to do it as soon as possible, because there may be a little bit of downtime and republishing going on. But basically, you've got to open a support case in order to be able to change your Power BI tenant location. So, all right, check this. Next up, and this is something that you are going to need to be a Power BI administrator for, you really need to go and check the tenant settings for Power BI. Now, you can do this by going to the Power BI portal, clicking on the settings option up here, and going to admin portal. If you are a Power BI administrator, you're going to have this tenant settings option up here. Let's go to tenant settings. Now, there are absolutely tons and tons of tenant settings here, and if you read the Planning a Power BI Enterprise Deployment white paper, it goes through just about every single one and tells you in detail what they do and gives you some recommendations as to what to set them for. Now, I'm not going to go through absolutely everything here, but what I will say is that there are two that you really need to check and look at as soon as possible. And they are these two here. Now, the first one, share content with external users. If this is enabled, it will allow people to share Power BI content, that means reports and dashboards and other stuff, with people outside your organization via Azure B2B. Now, that might be something that you want people to do, because sometimes it's a really great idea to be able to share reports with partners, customers, so on. But at the same time, you might decide that there's no legitimate reason for people to be able to do this. And of course, allowing people to share content outside the organization also then means that somebody could say, oh, I'm going to get a new job with your competitor. Let's share some really sensitive reports with my future colleagues at my competitor, maybe the list of customer prospects or something, and bingo, this is a gigantic security problem. So have a look at this. You can either turn it on or off, or you can enable it only for specific security groups. Now, another thing, and this is something perhaps even more important, is publish to web. So publish to web, if this is enabled, and like I said, it can be enabled for the entire organization or specific security groups again, it allows you to publish a Power BI report on the public internet, which means that anybody with the URL can go away and find your reports. Now, there is a good reason why you might want to do this. For example, you might be publishing reports and you want to put them on your company website. You might be a data journalist and you want to share the results of your findings via Power BI with the world. You might be a Power BI developer and you want to show off how great you are at developing Power BI reports and want to publish your reports on a public gallery. But at the same time, it has come to our attention at Microsoft that a lot of people abuse this. They think, I don't want to spend money on Power BI licenses. What I'm going to do is use this publish to web option, publish my sensitive Power BI reports on the web, and then just email around the URLs for them. Now, this is an incredibly bad idea. This is an incredibly stupid idea. Do not ever do this. And if you catch anybody doing this, well, you probably want to give them a piece of your mind. So, turn this off unless you know that somebody's got a very good reason to do it. And if you turn it off and people say, oh, I can't get hold of my reports anymore, well, they were getting hold of their reports in a very insecure way. I'm not going to demo it, but if you know what you're doing with a search engine, you can find all kinds of Power BI reports that are really intended for internal consumption only, that have been published like this. So do not do this. I work for Microsoft. I am telling you explicitly, this is not a way of publishing your reports. So as a Power BI admin, it's your job to stop this kind of naughtiness, turn it off, unless, like I said, you've got a good reason for people to use this. Okay, next tip. So you're a friendly person. You've already successfully made friends with your Microsoft 365 administrator. Guess what? There are going to be more friends that you need to make. First of all, you need to go away and make friends with your organization's IT department. Now, if you work in the IT department, fine, you don't need to go and make friends with them because you're already in the IT department. But if you're not in the IT department, and quite a lot of Power BI administrators aren't, you're going to have to go away and be nice to them. Because again, these are people who are going to help you a lot in future. The number one reason why you're going to want to be friends with somebody in the IT department is that you and your users are going to want to have access to data. And typically this will be in systems that are owned and run by the IT department. You do not want a situation where your end users want to build reports but can't have access to the data, and then end up in a situation where they've got to click export to Excel every day to get Excel workbooks or CSV files or something to feed their reports. Ideally, you're going to want to be able to connect those reports directly up to the back-end systems, of course, in a controlled way, and not in a way that's going to cause problems for those back-end systems, but you'll need that access. So be friends with your IT department. They're likely to be the gatekeepers for the data that you need. You're also going to need to make friends with a senior executive. Why? Well, any kind of BI is inherently political, as well as the technical problems of building Power BI reports. Chances are that as soon as reports get built, they're going to be seen by senior people. There will be managers, decision makers interested in what you're doing. And it could be that there are other people with ideas about how BI should be done. There are going to be other people who don't like what you're doing. There are going to be other people who decide that Power BI is not the way to go, that your organization needs to use another BI tool. So typically there will be a lot of internal politics coming your way as a result of your job as a Power BI administrator. And you're going to need to have somebody to fight your corner. And that's going to have to be a fairly senior person. Now, hopefully you already know that person. Quite often senior people take a very close interest in BI because they love making decisions, they love the data. But if you haven't got that support, you need some kind of executive sponsor to fight your corner. Good luck. This next tip is a bit philosophical, and it's really worth you taking the time to sit down before you go any further and think about how BI needs to be done inside your organization. Because the decision you make here will really inform a lot of the other decisions you make later on about how you configure all kinds of things from workspaces to permissions, so on. Now, in the BI industry, there have effectively been kind of two extremes of how organizations do BI. On one hand, you've got what people call corporate BI. So in the old days of BI tended to be done by people in the IT department. And the idea was the IT department were the only people with the technical skills necessary to be able to do BI. So what would typically happen would be that they would sit down and say, well, okay, we've got a problem with reporting. The business wants more reports. So they would set about and think about creating a kind of nicely engineered solution to this. They would build a data warehouse, perhaps on something like SQL Server, with all of the data that people wanted to build reports on. And it was all nicely cleaned, configured, conformed, properly modeled. And then they might put something like an analysis services cube on top of it. They might sit down and build lots and lots and lots of reports using something like SQL Server reporting services. And you talk to the business and say, well, what do you want? You take down lots of requirements and go and build what people wanted. Now, this is corporate BI. There were lots of companies that were very successful with this approach. There were lots of companies that had less success with it. The problem with the corporate BI model was basically it was very centralized, it was very inflexible, and it was all in the hands of IT. And what that meant was that it tended to be quite expensive, and it meant that it was quite slow to deliver. You think about a typical data warehouse project, it might take years and years to build that data warehouse. And by the time it was ready, by the time the analysis services cubes were built, by the time somebody had built that nice looking report that the business wanted, times had changed, business had moved on, and nobody wanted what they specified a couple of years ago. What's more, the business found, well, okay, it would be Friday night, somebody's got a meeting to prepare for on Monday morning, they've got to build a report, they've got some data to analyze, and they would call up IT and say, well, I need this report by Monday. And IT would say, well, yeah, but unfortunately I'm really busy, so I can have it ready for you in about 3 weeks. And that just wasn't good enough. So the business tended to get quite frustrated with this highly centralized approach. Now, let's not forget there are some advantages to this. It was built by professionals, it was robust, it followed standards, the data all was correct. It had been sourced, it had been checked properly. The data loading procedures were built so that they would generally just work, and if they didn't, people were notified. But at the same time, there were these problems with it. Now, the extreme, the polar opposite to corporate BI is self-service BI. And that's got an equally long history. And let's face it, self-service BI begins with spreadsheets and Excel. Everybody's worked in organizations that completely run off Excel. And let's not forget Access and other tools like that have had a kind of honorable mention here as well. And the good thing about self-service BI is that it kind of fixes all of the problems of corporate BI. By putting tools in the hands of end users who can build their own reports, they can build exactly what they want. They don't have to go away and tell somebody else what to build. They think of what they want to build and they build it themselves. And when they want it to change, they can just go away and change it. That's the beauty of tools like Excel. Now, Excel's been around forever. Over the last 10 years or so, a new range of self-service tools came in, and Power BI, when it first started, was also a purely self-service BI tool as well. The problems with self-service BI are equally well known. If you think about self-service BI done in Excel, everybody thinks about the term Excel hell. With everybody building reports and no central governance or standards, everybody just builds whatever they want. Nobody knows where the data's come from. The data could be out of date. People could make all kinds of different mistakes with preparing and cleaning the data. People might define calculations differently, call things different things, refresh reports at different times. Typically, building these reports and maintaining them is a very manual, slow process. So it needs somebody every day to be able to do this job. And there are some people whose entire life involves, cranking queries, getting data, copying and pasting stuff into Excel reports. I really sympathize with them. And of course, they break quite easily. So if somebody goes away on holiday, the report doesn't run and business crashes to a close. So self-service BI was equally bad. Now, knowing these things, your job as a Power BI administrator is to think, well, where's the happy medium between these two? Now, there is no single answer for the right way to do BI. It's going to depend on your organization. But you really need to sit down and think, well, how is BI going to be done? You can't just sit and let things happen the way it's always happened. especially if it's not been successful in the past, because you're just going to repeat the same mistakes of the past, just with Power BI rather than the other tools that people were using. If you do let your end users loose with Power BI without any kind of central governance, and guess what? You're the central governance as the Power BI administrator, then you're just going to end up with Power BI hell instead of Excel hell. If you say, well, I work in the IT department, my end users are not going to be able to do anything with Power BI apart from view the reports that I build, well, guess what? You're going to be beset with thousands of requests for reports, or more likely, your end users are just going to go back to building their reports in Excel. So you're going to have to really find that balance and move on from whatever you've done in the past. Find a situation where you get the best of self-service BI and the best of corporate BI. And that typically involves, the IT department playing a role of providing the data, and not only providing the data, having a role in modeling it as well. The IT department has got great skills for that suit well the tasks of building things like Power BI datasets or providing data in the form of data flows, and they've got great skills with helping kind of centralize security. The business users, the traditional self-service users, on the other hand, are going to be the people who tend to know how calculations are defined. They tend to know how reports should work and look. The basic things that a report should show you. So try and work out what the best mix between having the IT people and the self-service users work in harmony is. And like I said, the mix is going to vary depending on your organization. So find a balance that works for you. Building on my previous point, something that we find pretty much all of our most successful Power BI customers do is create something called a center of excellence for Power BI. Now, this is a very broad term, and it can mean, again, different things for different people. But what I've just said is, every successful Power BI implementation finds some kind of happy medium between self-service BI and corporate BI. And one of the key things that a center of excellence does is put you as the kind of central administrator in touch with your users to not only help them, but help them help you. All right. So in some cases, a center of excellence is just a name for a group of Power BI administrators doing their job. But the good news is, especially if you're an accidental administrator and you're trying to do this part-time, you can help, or you can get other people in your organization to help you do your job, and they'll want to do it. They'll actually come out and do these things voluntarily. And the key to getting that kind of help and scaling out that way is setting up a community of Power BI users inside your organization. And this is going to allow you to scale out. It'll mean that you can pass part of your role onto other people inside the organization. This is all tied up with another phrase that we at Microsoft use quite extensively, and that's called creating what's called a data culture. And a center of excellence is one of those things that is very hard to describe, but has an immense number of benefits. Let me have a go at describing it. So BI is one of those things, as you'll very quickly learn, that people not only have to do as part of their job, but actually they quite enjoy doing. There are a whole ton of people in finance who really love crunching numbers. There are people who've been frustrated with their jobs for years because they've never really known what's gone on in the business. And once you give these people Power BI, they'll fall in love with it. They'll start using it not only willingly, but they'll start evangelizing it throughout their department. And one of the things about a center of excellence is that it should allow you to not only make contact with this community, but allow different users of Power BI inside your organization to talk to each other. And as soon as they do that, they'll want to help each other. They'll be swapping tips and tricks. They'll be solving DAX problems for each other. Your job as a Power BI administrator is to encourage that and provide the framework for that. What we find is that quite often the center of excellence throughout in the organization takes the form of something like a team site or a Yammer page where everybody can come together and talk about how Power BI is used inside the organization. Give them an opportunity to ask questions, give you a place to be able to reach out to your users and make announcements and tell people about what's happening, not only in the wider world of Power BI, but in Power BI inside your organization. Discuss getting access to data sources, promote best practices that are specific to your organization as well. Now, some of those resources online that that I mentioned earlier are specifically to do with creating a center of excellence and fostering a data culture. If we go back to the browser, in the Power BI guidance documents, there is a section on establishing a center of excellence. There's also a page on how Microsoft does Power BI internally. Some of those customer stories, like the Rockwell Automation one, talk about how they've gone about creating a community of Power BI users, and they do things that I think are really cool, like these power hours where people can present what they've done with Power BI and really create something like an internal user group. And then finally, my colleague Matthew Roche, whose blog I was mentioning earlier, has got a whole series of posts on specifically building a data culture for Power BI. So don't think about a center of excellence as just a department that does a job and that job happens to be admin. Think about a center of excellence as also a way of bringing together all of the Power BI users in one place, giving them a forum to ask their questions, to ask questions to you, but to ask questions to other people. Because like I said, once you've built that enthusiasm, once people have fallen in love with data and with Power BI, they will willingly go out and help each other. And that's just going to grow the Power BI community even more. And as more and more people use Power BI and more decisions are based on data, more and more people will see the value of Power BI, and it'll just grow exponentially. Following from that last point, if you're going to create a Power BI Center of Excellence, you're going to need to find a way of letting all of the Power BI users in your organization contact you. And there's actually a really nice way of doing this that you may not be aware of. If you go to the Power BI Tenant settings page that we looked at earlier, so let's go there now. This Publish Get Help Information option is something that you might want to consider using. When you turn it on, it allows you to enter a whole series of URLs for where users in your organization can find training documentation, discussion forum, make licensing requests, or go to a help desk. And these can be URLs that point to somewhere inside your organization, your own specific places. And once you've done this, what happens is that when you go to, or when a user goes to help, all of the links up here that normally go to Microsoft documentation can be redirected to your own documentation. So, documentation here can be redirected to whatever link you put here. And this can be a really good way of, when users are looking for help, of making sure they find you rather than more generic Microsoft resources. And this can then be a way of making them aware that the Center of Excellence exists and pointing them to the resources that you've got internally available to help them. Something else you're going to want to consider when you're thinking about your community of users is getting some training for them. Now, some people will go away and learn Power BI on their own. Some people are going to want to have some formal training. Luckily, there are a lot of free training materials out there that you can use to be able to provide training to your end users. It's also worth pointing out that different people will have different training requirements. Some people will want to be trained on just using Power BI as a consumer. Some people will want to have training on building Power BI reports from pre-existing datasets. Some people will want to have training on absolutely everything, including all the technical details of building datasets, defining calculations in DAX and so on. But luckily there is free material available from Microsoft that will cover just about all these needs. First of all, something I showed you earlier, the free Power BI training content in terms of that's available here on the community blog. And we've got courses, not only Administrator in a Day, but Dashboard in a Day, Advanced Modeling, Advanced Data Shaping, and so on. And once again, you can download not only the course materials, but the instructor materials in case you want to be able to run these courses internally. If you want to have online material, if you go to powerbi.com and go to resources, and then go to learn and go to guided learning, there is a ton of video material available here, but all the latest material is available on Microsoft Learn. This is probably the best place to go to get all of the latest training material. And there's material here on consuming data in Power BI, on using DAX. There's loads and loads of really in-depth information here. So this is, I think, perhaps the greatest resource that we at Microsoft got available. You might also want to get in some paid training. There are a lot of great people out there who do in-depth training, both in video form or who'll come to your site to be able to deliver a training course. But generally what we find is that investing in training really pays dividends, because without it, people get frustrated, they make mistakes, you know, they don't love Power BI as much as they can do, and they'll cause problems for you as an administrator. You know, they'll create reports that are slow, reports that maybe put a lot of pressure on source systems. If you can get people building the best possible Power BI reports, then the members of your community will be even happier, and the wider organization, the people who've got to consume those reports, will be equally happy with the improved results. Another large part of your job as a Power BI administrator is going to be managing licenses. Now, as you probably know, there are two types of license that a Power BI user can have. Power BI Free, which as the name suggests is free, and Power BI Pro, which costs money. Generally speaking, in an organization, if you're going to be doing anything useful like building content, you're going to have a Power BI Pro subscription assigned to you, a Power BI Pro license. Now, Power BI Pro licenses cost money. You could get Power BI Pro licenses because you bought them specifically. You might get Power BI Pro licenses as part of a bundle. For example, you might have an E5 Office subscription. Generally, you're going to fall into the first camp. You're going to have to buy some Power BI Pro licenses. And because Power BI Pro licenses cost money, you might not want to give Power BI Pro licenses out to everybody in the organization, because not everybody is going to be building Power BI content. So as a result, as a Power BI administrator, you're not only going to have to buy these licenses, but you're going to have to assign them, and assign them to the people who actually need them, the people that you know are going to use them. This comes with a bit of responsibility. So some organizations actually have a process for getting a Power BI Pro license. You can't just call up and say, I need one. You might have to go through perhaps a little bit of an interview to say, well, why do you need one? What are you going to do with it? Some organizations force people who are getting pro licenses to actually take part in a training course. The other part of this is that you need to monitor to see who is actually using their Power BI Pro license, and for people who aren't using them, you might want to actually take the Power BI Pro license away, so when somebody else comes along and says I need a Power BI Pro license, you don't have to buy a new one, you can simply assign one from your existing pool. So there's quite a lot to think about here with managing licensing. And of course, this leads on to another really big question. Do you need Power BI Premium? Now, Power BI Premium is something that everybody's talking about. What does it actually mean? Power BI Premium I've heard described as being a Happy Meal product. It gives you a number of different benefits. Probably the main reason why people buy Power BI Premium is for the licensing benefits. Now, if you don't have Power BI Premium, in order to be able to build content, share it with others, and also just consume content that other people have built, you have to have a Power BI Pro license. Now, Power BI Pro licenses are fairly cheap, but if you've got an organization with a large number of users in, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of users, buying a Power BI Pro license for absolutely everybody could get quite expensive. And of course, like I've just said, some users will build content, some people will just be consumers. And it's likely to be the vast majority of people who are just consumers. So from a licensing point of view, Power BI Premium, at the time of recording this session, generally becomes cost effective when you've got about 600-700 users who just consume content. Because with Power BI Premium, what you're able to do is publish your reports into a workspace on a Power BI Premium capacity, and then people with Power BI free licenses assigned to them can just view the content without having to buy a Power BI Pro license. So from a licensing point of view, basically, if you've got about at least 600-700 users who just want to view content, it'll be more cost efficient for you to go away and buy Premium. Now, Premium doesn't just give you licensing benefits, of course. Power BI Premium gives you a whole bunch of other functionality benefits as well. For example, it allows you to work with larger data sets in terms of data volumes. It allows you to process, to refresh your data sets more times a day. It gives you more functionality. So for example, features in data flows like computed and linked entities are only available with Power BI Premium. So it's definitely worth checking out all of the extra functionality that you get with Power BI Premium as well. One last thing to say about Premium. Power BI Premium does come with a bit of an extra admin overhead. So if you're the Power BI administrator and you buy Premium, there's going to be a little bit of extra work there to be able to manage that Premium capacity. Not only to control who can put their workspaces on there, but also to look at resource consumption and so on. The last important job that I'm going to talk about that you're going to have to do as a Power BI administrator is monitoring and auditing. You're going to want to see what's happening inside your Power BI tenant for a variety of different reasons. Now, there's a ton of different things that you can look at or you want to look at as an administrator. So let's get an idea of what they are. First of all, perhaps the most useful place to get information about what's happening in the tenant is from the audit logs. Now, there's two ways of getting at this data. You can go to the admin portal, go to audit logs, click here to go to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and there's a UI here to get data out of the Microsoft 365 audit logs. Now, you're going to have permissions to do this, and a Power BI administrator on their own is not able to do this, because there's more information in here than just Power BI. Now, if you've got permissions, great, you can get it out. If you don't have permissions, if you're just a Power BI administrator, there's good news, because we've now got something called the Power BI activity log, which is basically all of the Power BI related information from that Microsoft 365 audit log, but just filtered down to Power BI. And you only need to be a Power BI administrator to get it, and you can get hold of this through an API. There's a PowerShell commandlet. So what I strongly recommend is that you get hold of the data from this API, store it, you can build a Power BI report from it. And more or less every time something happens inside Power BI, somebody publishes a report, whatever, that gets logged in the audit log. So build a report, analyze this data. It's going to be really, really useful. There are other things that you can look at as well. For example, we've got a usage metrics report up here in the admin portal. I'll be honest, it's not great. And it's going to get a makeover fairly soon, but it does what it does. You can also go to individual reports and have a look at usage metrics. This is an awful lot better. There aren't any usage metrics on this particular report, but it'll give you an idea of what's available. You can look at report usage, the number of times it's open, the number of viewers, the performance, how long it took to open, and so on. And it's going to be really important if you've got reports to know whether people are using them or indeed not using them, or if those reports are really slow. Because quite often, if people don't like your reports, they're not going to tell you, they'll just not use them for whatever reason. Another thing that you might want to have a look at is gateways and refresh. If you want to actually see where all your gateways are, that's actually not something available through the Power BI Admin Center. You've got to go to something called the Power Platform Admin Center at admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. If you go to Data Gateways, that will give you a list of all the data gateways that are associated with your Power BI tenant, which can be quite a handy thing. If you've got Power BI Premium, like I said, there's more monitoring and admin involved with having a premium capacity. And there are a few extra things that you can do to use to monitor your premium capacity. So there's the Power BI Premium Capacity Metrics app, which you've got here, which has got a lot of detail about what's happening on your premium capacity, looking at query performance, dataset refreshes, so on and so forth. And you can also go to the admin portal if you've got a premium capacity, and you can see under this refresh summary settings, you can see a history of all of the dataset refreshes and how long they took on that premium capacity. So you can see if a dataset is taking too long, or maybe the last refresh was perhaps a lot more than the normal average duration, or indeed if the refresh failed. So lots and lots of things that you can do to make sure your Power BI environment is running smoothly, that people are using reports, and everything is performing well. All right, one last tip for you. As a Power BI administrator, you're going to have a whole lot of people coming to you asking for advice about how to do things with Power BI, about what might be happening in the future. So, we all know that loads and loads of new bits of functionality and cool features come for Power BI, and it's a good idea to be prepared for what's coming in the future. So how do you know what is coming in the future for Power BI? Well, you can go to a simple website which actually tells you the public roadmap for Power BI. It's called the Power BI Release Plan, Power Platform Release Plan. Just look for Power Platform Release Plan, go to Power BI, have a look at what's new and planned, and you can see here a list of all of the things that are coming up in Power BI Desktop, Power BI Embedded, the Power BI Mobile app, and the Power BI Service. So this is going to allow you to be prepared for future changes and future new functionality, so that you're not surprised every month where the latest version of Power BI Desktop comes out and it includes some new feature that your users are immediately using and asking you about that maybe you didn't even know was coming. Right. that's it from me. I hope you've picked up some useful tips and tricks. And all that's left for me to say is good luck for the future, and I hope you enjoy being a Power BI administrator. Thanks a lot.